Hi, Roger. Welcome to Legal Practice Intelligence. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, how are you doing? Thanks for having me. My name is Roger Gregg, and I'm one of the co-founders with my brother Chris of a company called Lightyear.
Great. And I mean, what's your company do?
Lightyear is in the accounts payable, procurement, and eventually in the payments space. So we're in that sort of space that looks after your inbound bills for your business, your relationship with your suppliers, and then the payment of those bills, which will come next year. But at the moment, it's accounts payable automation and procurement.
And typically, who are your customers that you're actually servicing?
Oh, there's quite a variety, actually. There's probably two main types of customers. There are customers, firstly, that require line item detail extracted from their supplier bills. Okay, so those may be retailers, construction, pharmacies, hospitality, things like that.
Yep.
And that customer is more interested in the line item detail. Okay.
Yep.
The second type of customer maybe doesn't care about the line item detail, but they're really more interested in security, where the document has come from, and then the approvals workflow that actually comes through with that. Because in Lightyear, we have this proprietary tech that extracts line item information, and we do that actually by reading the metadata within documents. So it's not OCR. We have OCR, but that's a secondary data extraction. And because we're actually doing the metadata extraction from the supplier's bills that are sent in, we've got complete certainty on the content that we're extracting, and therefore you can create rules to say, you know, if you see the word, you know, lollipop on a bill, route it to this person and send it on its merry way. So the type of customer is actually twofold, but it all comes back to customers that actually rely on the accuracy of the data at the core of their approvals workflow, for want of a better word.
So if I was a law firm, which a lot of our customers are, and we actually are using a lot of temps or consultants or temps and those kinds of folks, and they got a bill from the agency, effectively what you could do is you could strip down that bill and figure out line by line, and if they have different departments, it could be sent off to the different departments for a verification.
Exactly right. I mean, so suppose at a very basic level, you in effect create rules to say, you know, this, let's imagine it's Betty's Temp Agency. That's the agency. In Australia, Betty's Temp Agency will have an ABN on their bill. Basically, based on where the bill has come from, you know, sales at bettystemps.com.au, based on the metadata within the document, firstly, we're going to look at the sender and say, do you trust that sender? Do you trust documents coming in from this email address? And if it's coming in from Nigeria at princeofnigeria.com, it's going to stick there for you to sort of trash and handle. So yes, exactly right. So those documents would come in. Firstly, there's a trust that you establish from senders, and then based on the metadata within the document, it could be a job number, it could be the address of an office, which would then automatically be routed to that office manager for initial approval, etc., etc. That's how the first start of the first part of the process happens.
So I mean, you could effectively have that invoice sent through to a department, say it's litigation department, and what they could do is then check that invoice against any sort of any timesheet items they've got on their own records as well.
Exactly. So I mean, if I use the example, let's say there is a job or a client reference or something on the document, that would then be automatically routed to the person whose job it is to approve that document with that job number. But it would then be automatically categorized with the GL code and categorized with, for instance, the job if you're using, let's say, MYOB, or the tracking category if you're using CR. So that bookkeeping is completely automated. And it now should just be a case that the people whose job it is to approve the bills, and they can do that, you know, via the mobile app, or if they prefer to do it as a browser, like I personally prefer to do. That's then going to route its way through the org to the partners if that's required. but everything's actually coded. It should just be a case of clicking the green button, for want of a better word.
Got it. Got it. That makes sense. I mean, well, who do you integrate with? So which systems do you integrate with?
Well, we've APIs with quite a few. Let's say you've got NetSuite, Xero's, MyOps, QuickBooks, there's a raft. But then Sage is also just about to be launched. But then we actually have a widget that's actually buried inside of Lightyear. So let's say you're using an older legacy system that can accept just a CSV file. You can actually just go to Lightyear and define your own export format and lock it away. So it doesn't really matter that we don't connect to an old, let's say someone's using MyOb 2011 desktop. I don't think anyone is anymore, but you could still create the format in Lightyear to get into that old version of software. So we do have a lot of API integrations, but I would have thought maybe around about 35% of our documents get exported to a system that we internally refer to as other, because it's another system that we haven't actually API'd to as yet.
That's very interesting. I mean, I guess from a, I guess the people are in professional services world are actually using a number of different inputs, and they've got different suppliers and inputs, and they've got processes where they need approvals on bills. I mean, what you've got is actually really useful.
Yes, it is. And I mean, we started, I'm talking back in 2011, 2012, we had an initial product called InvitBox, which, and Lightyear is sort of InvitBox 2.0. So even though Lightyear has only been in market for maybe just over 3 years, there's actually 10 years of tech in it. And we started way back then, initially in the hospitality space. We were solving a problem for hospitality venues. And respectfully, we have always said, if we can get a chef to use Lightyear, anyone could use it. And that's nothing against chefs. It's simply because chefs are approving bills late at night after a hard shift. Their eyes are tired and they're not trained to do this, right? So even though we started in hospitality, a lot of things spilled out of it. And in fact, one of our first clients outside of hospitality back in 2013 was a legal practice with 7 offices across Australia. And it was the ability to take the bills into one central location and then send them out in effect to the office managers.
Wow.
And then have this in another process where you can define the number of executives or partners that each have to sign off on a bill as well. So you might have 5 partners and 2 partners have to sign off on every bill at the end of the day. So one of the sectors that we spilled into out of hospitality first was actually a legal firm or the series of offices. So we've gone across many sectors now. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. I mean, last 2 years, my goodness me, been a challenge for many people. I mean, how's it sort of, I guess, what have you, I mean, how's it impacted you, and how's it impacted, I guess there's this term hybrid working, and how's it work for you?
Listen, I think we're like everyone in the world, it came as a bit of a shock, clearly. I mean, I would say, I think COVID has actually been kind to us. We certainly had to reassess our roadmap through that period. So during 2020, I think part of our major roadmap work for the second half of that year was originally to be on the procurement side, purchase orders and things like that. And we quickly had to pivot to basically build out the mobile app and build out this flexible approvals workflow, right? To allow you to get bills automatically into the hand of a person who's perhaps working from the local cafe, so they can approve bills on the mobile and things like that. So a lot more people have been forced to create procedures and look at their internal procedures based on the fact that you can't just walk over to someone and put something in front of them and say, hey, can you sign that?
Yeah.
So that has actually been a blessing for us. It has focused a lot of businesses' mind to go, hold on, are we still trying to do this with a piece of paper?
Yeah.
And our mantra from day one back in 2011 has been, if you start with paper, you end up with rubbish. You've rubbish data, rubbish systems, rubbish processes. Just because you receive a piece of paper doesn't mean you should be beholden to it. You can always get a supplier to email you a PDF. That's a given now, right?
Yep.
And then because you can receive the PDF, firstly, you've got security because you're not looking at a piece of paper to go, where did this come from?
Yep.
Has someone edited it and just printed it again? And so the audit trail of something coming from a vendor through the mail server being directly then assigned to individual people wherever they are, that has actually resonated a lot in the market over the last couple of years. So as much as I wouldn't want to go through the last 2 years again, I think as Lightyear, we've come out of it quite strongly, to be honest.
Yep. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And have you seen many? I guess, what kind of changes have you seen with your customers from a staffing standpoint, from a working standpoint? I mean, what kinds of things are you seeing?
Yeah, so like I say, we've a right raft of customers. Let's say 40% hospitality, 10% aged care, et cetera, et cetera. Then through service sectors, and certainly in the aged care space, and talking about people in the aged care space who are reliant upon, contractors, third-party people, especially during COVID, where they're having to parachute people into the organization for 1 week or 1 month at a time. Well, they think it's 1 month, it ends up being 1 year that the person's with them. But the number of documents being processed through COVID has actually gone up because more and more people, it's not like you have, let's say with Officeworks, a centralized office order that's coming in once a week. You've now got separate little satellite locations and you're needing to send office supplies to these individual people's homes. So for instance, the number of office work bills on average has gone up, right? So it's very much like that. People have just had to, I suppose, reassess not their business. Their business is their business, but how they actually make the business efficient at doing what it sort of used to do when you were all in the same room together.
Yeah, it certainly has been a change for many people. I mean, the folks working from home, some folks working in the office. I mean, everything going from paper to electronic. There's been some massive changes. I mean, also I think as well, people talk about this thing called the Great Resignation. I don't know if it's real or not, or what's happening with it, but I think there's skilled people that are going, stuff it. I just don't want to work in this thing anymore. I don't want to be an accounts payable. I don't want to be a bookkeeper. I actually want to, and that means that I guess you've got folks that are in the industry that are kind of going, well, I'm leaving. I'm going to start a craft business or whatever. And what happens is that you then have this staffing impact on the organization. So I guess what you're doing is automating those processes to make it bulletproof.
Yeah, I don't think anyone in life set out to be a data entry professional, but a lot of people have become data entry professionals. And the accounts payable department, it's never listed as a line on your P&L, but the cost is there from the point of view of desk space, the wages, the perhaps double payment of vendors, late fees, et cetera, et cetera. And very often with the implementation of Lightyear, you find that, and 80% is actually saving in terms of the time spent on AP processing.
Okay.
But that can actually then mean that you only need to be using an external resource for 1 day a week, which obviously means you're saving. But if it's an internal resource, that person or persons probably know more about procurement in the organization than anyone else because they're literally spending weeks and months at a time manually entering this stuff. So it frees that person to then do other things within the organization. So accounts payable, sort of Lightyear isn't always necessarily a way to just cut 80% of the APs, the accounts payable department's cost from you. But it's like, how can I use this better? How can this person then help other people in the organization on procurement or negotiation and things like that?
I mean, I like that point because, I mean, effectively, I don't think that, I think there's a number of accounts payable people who would like to actually grow their careers and get into more of the financial accounting side of things, or perhaps get into, as you said, procurement negotiation. I mean, I think to myself, if they spent the time on negotiating contracts and going back to suppliers, I mean, the result could be quite amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, depending on your organization, so certainly in, for instance, hospitality, where most vendors will offer some form of early settlement discount, and I'm not saying this is in every org, but with Lightyear, you'll literally get a bill in and it'll be in your accountancy system at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And then you can avail of that 1.5% 7-day discount. So if the cash is there, you can actually avail of the discounts. It's one example, for instance. which just sort of drives a few efficiencies.
I mean, I guess one interesting point. I'm sort of seeing a lot more people talking about this whole world of crypto and those sort of areas. Where do you see that sort of going in terms of accounts payable and people, I guess, paying bills with crypto and things like that?
To a degree, it's going to be a little bit controlled by the banks, to be honest, and the maybe not even at an individual ASX listed company level, but also by governments. At the end of the day, like Lightyear, when we facilitate a payment, we're basically just going to say, hey, how do you want payment to be made? Do you want to just tap into and do an ABA file or a connectivity through to your banking system? Or, if there is a demand for pay by crypto, that's where we go. I mean, we're certainly not going to dictate how the market pays, but if the market says this is a way that we want to pay, that's part of our job as a tech company to facilitate that and make your life easier in that regard. We're certainly not going to force you down one route, no.
Yeah, no, great. Have you got any client success stories you want to share about, I guess, how Lightyear's actually worked with organisations in the professional services space?
Well, yes, I'll give one, and I won't use a name. They're professional services ASX listed company. They initially approached Lightyear, and when we spoke to them initially, they were trying to get their heads around this process that they'd created over the last number of years with paper. How can we actually replicate that digitally? We often ask people, would you like us to be subservient to you and say yes, 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 or do you want us to challenge your thinking? And thankfully, most people, when you ask them that question, turn around and say, oh yeah, we challenge my thinking, of course, right? But this was a really good one because their whole systems, and they had really rigorous systems based around where did the bills come from, who's seen the bill through the process. So almost recording, if your eyes had been on this bill, I need you to record the eyes were on the bill and things like that. And they actually, even though it was really robust, it was actually costing them a lot of money. And without going into too much, it was costing them around about $100,000 a year to process around about 2,500 bills. Okay, wow. So it's around about $40 a bill. And once that actually quite surprised them when they actually started looking at it. They said it couldn't cost me that much, but then went, well, that person's full time, and okay, $40 a bill. And we got them into Lightyear, and Lightyear's costing them around about 65 cents or something like that. Plus then the time to actually just for someone to click a button. So it literally was an 80% saving. But I think what they realized as well was because everything is electronic, and in effect, we are putting digital signatures onto any time that someone views a document.
Yeah.
A lot of the old thinking around paper and the robust processes that have been created to handle paper can actually be thrown away. The results at the end of the day is the same. You've got confidence where it came from, who saw it, who approved it, notes they added, things like that. And I think that's as good as an example as I could give. It was they were almost overthinking the process of going digital.
Yeah.
And the number of times we said, sorry, respectfully, you're overthinking this. You're just asking that guy to send his bill into this address, right?
Yeah.
And so their adoption process, which they thought was going to be a 3 to 6 month adoption, basically they started the next month. And
wow,
they said this is literally 80% savings. So there's a lot of mystery in tech. A lot of people look at, especially you say fintech, people go, ooh, right, fintech. We got to get a few people involved in this conversation. But I mean, our job at the end of the day is to demystify fintech, right? It's to basically put an electronic solution that as closely mirrors your existing solution in front of you with as little friction as possible. That's just one example. I mean, in hospitality and aged care and retail, the savings are actually a lot higher because you're actually extracting that line item data and sending it into multiple systems. You're actually saving 2 sets of data entry, et cetera, doing price checking and things like that. But in the professional services, it's a reasonable assumption that 80% saving with very little change management can be got pretty quickly.
That's pretty amazing. Look, Roger, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it, and look to hearing more about your solution as it expands into professional services.
Thanks very much indeed.